What secret did you once know that has since become public knowledge? My astronomy professor in first year told my class about the very high probability that gravitational waves had been detected a week before they were officially announced. I do consulting work for a major automaker. I've known about new cars and seen pictures weeks before details were revealed. People are looking at ATK suspicions and speculating about specs on Jalopnik and our cars while I have high-res images and full specs. As a car guy, it's kind of cool knowing before everyone else. I knew my best friend was sleeping with our middle school gym teacher from the time he was 15 years old. The rumors spread the rest of my school time all the way through high school. When he was 20, they moved in together for almost a year, and everybody knew it was true. That Jim had a thing for Pam. He confided in me on a booze cruise because we are really close friends. He was sad because she was engaged at the time. But you know what? I told him to never, ever give up. I am a patent lawyer, so lots of inventions that most people would find pretty boring, they usually eventually publish. I worked for Warner Brothers Games division back in 2008 or so. They sent out some company-wide email jerking off about whatever big meeting they had and bragging about all the games that would be coming down the pipeline. Everyone on the floor got it at the same time. Took one look and said a variation of WTF as Mad Max, Fury Road. Not 2 minutes later there was a hastily written email explaining in very bold letters that internal communications are confidential and subject to NDA. ETC we'll fire you. This isn't super cool, but back in middle school, my best friend's mom worked for some sort of vending machine company and got to try Snickers peanut butter before it came out to the public. So I just got to try a pretty good candy bar a few weeks before it was released to everyone else. I read less than Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows more than 3 weeks before it was available everywhere. No connections. A small bookstore in suburban South Korea either A, didn't get the memo they weren't supposed to put it on shelves until the 21st of July. Books having a release date is a foreign concept in Korea. Or B, didn't care. The split up of Gavin Rossdale and Gwen Stefani. My wife's friend's sister was their nanny and we found out a month before it came out and was sworn not to tell anyone. The best bit was, all the tabloid blamed the nanny. So friend's sister called Gwen and asked her to set everyone straight and Gwen said no, you can't do that and to wait it out and it will blow over. Did a full series of artwork for the toy lineup for Avengers Infinity War. All the heroes in all their new outfits. I think most have been revealed by now though. This was over a year ago. Was cool to work on. About the new Skyway at Walt Disney World. I knew about it when the Imagineers were still in the planning phase. Well, I was an intelligence analyst back in the 90s. After the Berlin Wall came down and the USSR turned into Russia with glasnost and perestroika and all that, everyone was like the Cold War is over. Yay. Even people in the military were on board. Except for everybody that worked in intelligence. We were all like nope. They are going to fall back, regroup and keeping coming at us. It never ended folks. They just changed strategies. And it's not like we didn't try to warn people. Just nobody gave a it. I mean, nobody that mattered. Also, 9/11. I mean not that specific attack. But we knew something like that was bound to happen after we destabilized Iraq. Saddam was a real son of a bitch, but he kept a lockdown on his borders. After the Iraqi government collapsed, it was a ducking highway for every 2-bit jihadi looking to strap on and blow up some Yankees. And believe it or not, ducking up countries and their economies, killing a bunch of non-combatants and turning into an eternal occupying force pisses people off enough to do that sort of thing. What I'm saying is that most of our current world political problems were not only entirely predictable, they were predicted. The decisions makers were warned of the consequences and they ducking did it anyway. I knew it was my friend Kirby that was regularly eating on the floor in front of the toilet in the bathroom in high school. Some kid walked in on him doing it and told everyone. I'm guessing out of the 2,200 kids in our high school, 2,000 of them probably heard about it. That the risk associated with mortgage-backed securities was not being truthfully assessed and that the originators didn't give flying duck about the risk since they were able to sell them off 5 seconds after the deal was done, so the risk was no longer theirs. The government killed almost all of the lobsters in the Long Island Sound when using a new pesticide to spray for mosquitoes and paid all of the lobster fishermen large sums of money with tax dollars to avoid owning up to it. Wait, that still may not be public info. That Jimmy Savile was a child raping son of a rich. This was back in the late 80s. It wasn't exactly a state secret. Many people knew. It's just the media that won't talk about it. As for the ducking BBC, strange that even to this day they still don't mention all those corpses he ducked when he volunteered to work in the mortuary at Stoke Mandeville Hospital, or what he did during the long time he spent alone with the corpse of his adored mother. I knew about Patton Oswalt's wife's death before the press. A friend of mine is friends with Patton and he was in town for the Moon Tower Comedy Festival that year and we met up for coffee before his set and he told me about what had happened. I think that was the same day Prince died. I knew about the Dorito taco at Taco Bell weeks before everyone else. We had signs in the back preparing us for the reveal. North Korean ballistic missile development having missiles that were able to hit the continental United States. The media acts like it is some new thing. But they've had the technical capability since the mid-90s. Their missiles are just a bit more reliable now. My mom worked for Aunt Corporate so she would bring home snacks for us that didn't hit the shelves yet. It was pretty cool. Some of the first things we were able to try were Doritos 3D, Sprite Remix, the cereal bars with the milk frosting on the bottom. Somewhat the envy of our lunchrooms. Hardly a secret but I knew Holly Willoughby was doing a baby cookbook before said baby cookbook came out because I overheard someone involved with the production talking loudly on the phone about it during a train journey. A photographer in my area was sexually harassing and even sexually assaulting models. Everyone in the industry knew and my agent got really mad at a girl for doing a test shoot with him. He was a friend of a friend. But no one in the city knew until the Me Too phenomenon when 2 of his victims filed a police report against him, and countless other women spoke up, both models and girls who knew him before he became a photographer. I'm still waiting for vaccines don't cause autism and climate change is real to become public knowledge. That I'm trans. I came out publicly on Monday. I saw the Scooby-Doo movie before it was released. Because of family. I was a little kid so I was pretty psyched. I went to the Canadian premiere of The Last Jedi, so I knew all the spoilers 3 days before anyone else. It's actually really lonely because you can't talk about it with anyone. In HS, I knew we'd all one day be carrying around screen doodads and live our lives through them. Of course, since nobody was back then. People thought I was the weirdo for carrying a PDA. I didn't even have access to live data. I'd have to sync up in the morning to get news and weather, and manually load some video clips onto it. It was a lot more work to be a dork back then. My husband had a short-term contract at BioWare several years back. I got to see DA2 and ME3 in development. I know, people have opinions about those particular BioWare titles. But it was still a very cool experience that I couldn't tell any of my friends about at the time. I had to sign an NDA to get past the front desk every single time I brought him lunch. Back in 2012 I knew WF was opening unauthorized banking accounts. A banker opened 9 unauthorized business checking and savings accounts in my name. I became very suspicious when I received 9 debt cards in the mail in the following weeks. I panicked thinking someone stole my identity. I had to go to 3 WF banks before someone told me they had their suspicions that the banker was just trying to hit her monthly quotas to bonus. I freaked out and made them close all accounts. My husband is still convinced I was one of the first whistleblowers. Had a dry day today, and plan to keep it that way tomorrow too. My friend's homosexuality. Found out 2 years before they came out. Knew about Louis C.K., but so did everyone else working in and around stand-up comedy. That McGregor is a cokehead. Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt starting a relationship. Knew about a year and a half before. I know I'm not alone, but I took a tour of the Disney animation studio in the early 1990s and saw them working on the Roger Rabbit short roller coaster Rabbit that was released with D. Tracy. I managed to see the animator's shot list with the title of the short. I don't know if this counts, but my father worked for Hasbro and I got to test a lot of the toys before they came out. This was a long time ago, so it was mostly My Little Pony stuff lol, but it was pretty cool. The White House pressured the Challenger launch. Reagan was planning on talking to Krista McAuliffe during the State of the Union address. Remember, this was right after Iran-Contra. Firecall was a client of mine. My friend's dad worked for Paramount Pictures and used one of her sleepovers as an opportunity to show us 13-14 years old girls a screener VHS of Mean Girls, so we knew how awesome it was before it hit theaters. I knew the Challenger astronauts had survived the initial blast. That Matt Lauer was a creep. My college roommate worked on the Today Show and always had stories. The only thing shocking about him getting fired was that it took a cultural movement to get him out. That a certain director was going to be fired from a certain high-profile space fantasy movie series. I worked for one of the people that Kathleen Kennedy's office talked to about the director's drug problem. Throwaway because NDA. That an archdiocese in New Jersey was harboring sexual predator priests and were going to get sued big time. A place I was working at was involved in supporting the Catholic Church in their case prep. I was a lowly intern at the time and didn't have access to much info, but they were paying us a lot and they paid us very quickly too. The Catholic Church is loaded and they're willing to spend a lot to protect themselves at all costs. From what I heard, we gave them a ridiculously inflated quote that was super high and they paid it all without even bothering to negotiate it down. The Trump dossier. I was at dinner with a friend and his dad who told us that we could not share what he was about to tell us. He proceeded to explain that he heard from a friend in Washington that the Russians apparently have blackmail towards Trump based on a visit and a night spent with prostitutes. A week later, the New York Times broke the story. My mom worked at Boeing in the early 2000s and knew about military drones before we all did. She really didn't say anything about them until they were announced either. We were just watching the news and she was like, oh, they're finally releasing that to the public? I'm the only one who's really here. I knew my aunt, by marriage, was having an affair years before anyone else in my family did. We had gone to my uncle's house for Christmas one year and I wandered into their bedroom looking for a bathroom, but instead found my aunt with her tongue down one of my uncle's friend's throat. I was like 7 and grew up in a home with no married couples, so I totally didn't get what was going on. And it wasn't until years later when the whole thing, as well as multiple other affairs, came out that I realized and thought to maybe share the information with other members of my family. Toby Flenderson is just the worst. Friend of a friend was involved in the music industry. He called us and let us know that Michael Jackson had passed at least 2 hours before it hit the news. Wasn't really a secret rather than it not hitting stateside yet. My grandma came back from China with toys for me and my brother. They were Beyblades. These were legit compared to the ones that were released in America from what I assume were looser safety regulations. More durable plastic with a heavy metal weight in the center that was actually designed to create sparks when it hit the other Beyblade. We didn't understand what they were or how to play with them, so we kind of just shoved them underneath our beds till the anime became big. These things actually tore through the plastic on the American versions and it actually made my brother bleed once. Gordon Ramsay is bisexual and sleeps with his waiters. Oh wait, that hasn't come out yet. Survivor fans, I ran into Boston Rob and Amber in Mexico on their honeymoon. Before they announced their engagement and the fact that their whole wedding would be televised as a 3-hour special, I realized what was up when I asked to take a photo and they said we aren't allowed to, and I noticed the rings. The government traffics drugs into the country. I used to get called crazy for that theory, but then they made a movie about it. In 1983-87, an interesting friend of the family filled me in on many of the things that were eventually brought to light in the movie The Men Who Stare at Goats, and several that weren't. Kevin Spacey. In college, I went through a Kevin Spacey movie binge, and as I usually do, I started researching more about him. I'm a bit of a movie buff, but this dart I mean. Do any internet research on him, 2011 Beyond the Surface Level, and you'd know something was off. From the way he talked about his orientation, even for being closeted, it was weird. Like bringing up the subject of his sex life was highly offensive to him. to rumors of him being on the log for the fabled Lolita jet. I didn't want to believe it, but can't say the recent news was a great surprise. Not out just yet, but McDonald's is about to have a blue raspberry Sprite release in my area. The Louis C.K. wanking stuff. I knew Snape was not truly a Death Eater, nor was he a member of the Order. He was loyal only to his own heart.